Hello, everyone. This is us at Stories Lost, who are especially proud to bring you an episode from our own personal heartland, a place where we have deep roots. Sometimes stories come along that make you stop and go, wait, what? You know the kind. The ones where even decades later, nobody can quite explain what on earth happened. Well, welcome to Lake Siljan in Sweden, where not one, but two bizarre events left people scratching their heads, and everyone else wondering if they were seeing some kind of strange phenomena, or just losing the plot. First up, we've got Erik Bjöörs. It's 1925, and Erik, a 16-year-old boy from a small village in Rättvik, is walking through the snow one evening when he spots a glowing object dancing over the mountains. This thing isn't just a light show. It's moving in ways that shouldn't make sense. It hovers, it drops like a stone, and then it reappears, glowing brighter than anything he's ever seen. Erik and a friend even try to get closer, but are too freaked out by what they find. A pulsing, glowing object lying in the snow. It doesn't stick around long, though. After blinding them with its light, it takes off, leaving Erik with a story he'll be trying to explain for the rest of his life. Fast forward 50 years to 1976, and the weirdness isn't done with Lake Siljan. This time it's Rune and Ina Frännfors, out for a quiet drive. They're heading past the lake when they spot something insane. A black craft, ripping through 20-centimeter thick ice at breakneck speed. Ice is flying everywhere. The thing is moving like nothing they've ever seen, and they have no idea what to make of it. So they do what anyone would do: investigate. They head to the shoreline, but when the thing vanishes, they call the fire department for help. The firefighters show up, take one look at the scene, and decide there's no way any known boat could have done this. Whatever tore through that ice, it was moving faster and cutting deeper than anything they'd ever heard of. Two stories, 50 years apart, both involving strange lights, bizarre movements, and no clear answers. What's going on at Lake Siljan? Let's go right to the source. We pull these cases from UFO Information 1974, issue number 4, and UFO Information 1976, issue number 4. In 1974, Erik Bjöörs from the village of Bleket in Rättvik parish spoke with Ingvar Dam from UFO Sweden and shared an experience that he had at the age of 16. Rättvik, like many rural Swedish communities, is known for its strong sense of tradition, close-knit community bonds, and deep respect for shared history and folklore. The people of Rättvik, often described as practical and down-to-earth, hold a reputation for being hard-working and straightforward, not prone to exaggeration or fantastical stories. This makes it significant when someone like Erik Bjöörs, known for being a reliable, clever, and sensible boy, cited something out of the ordinary. It was the winter of 1925. I can't recall the exact month, but there was a lot of snow. The weather was clear and calm, and I was on my way to visit a family in the village that evening. When I reached their porch, I looked westward toward Siljan and saw over Hedsausberget an object somewhat larger than an evening star, shifting in bright yellow and red colors. The light kept rising and falling, which caught my attention. It hovered in place as I watched, but suddenly it plummeted straight down behind the mountain, just like a stone dropping. This startled me, as I had never seen a shooting star of that size before. I went inside to tell the family what I had seen, and they came out. As we stood there talking, it reappeared and stopped at exactly the same height. Naturally, we became intrigued. It's hard to say how long we observed it before it began to move southward, while rising in altitude, eventually stopping over a mountain called Roberget. The size now seemed like a normal star. We were puzzled about what this could be. Suddenly, it began to descend again. It lowered itself slowly, growing in size as it approached us. It moved toward the southern end of the village, descending all the while. My friend and I hurried toward the spot where the object was coming down. We were quite scared, but also curious, so we jogged the roughly 500-meter distance to the southern end of the village. The object lay on the snow in a hollow about 100 to 150 meters from the road where we stood. There were scattered trees and a hay shed around the area. We were now truly frightened and didn't dare get any closer. Because the object was in a dip and there was a lot of snow, we couldn't see it directly. However, there was a bluish-white, intensely bright glow around it, reflected by the shed and the trees. The light faded and darkness returned, only for it to flare up again to the same brightness. This happened several times. After a while, we saw that it was somehow changing. We watched as it slowly lifted at an angle between the trees. It now shone with an intense yellow-white light, blinding us so that we couldn't make out any details. It rose and set course for the mountain. Its speed was like that of a helicopter, and when it reached the mountain, it stopped at precisely the same height and spot as before. We then went back to my friend's house. Standing in the yard, we saw the object make the same journey again, landing in the same place. After its second journey, when it returned to its starting point, it didn't rise above the mountain but descended to the ground in front of it, and then went dark. There was no settlement in that spot, but in the 1800s, mineral excavations had been conducted there. Here we must take into consideration that the region's connection to nature and its rugged mountainous terrain also play a role in shaping local attitudes. Anomalies in the landscape, such as unusual lights or unexplained occurrences, are often met with both curiosity and cautious acknowledgement. Erik stood for a moment, processing the sight before him, the silence pressing in after the object vanished. In the interview with Ingvar Dam, he recalls that moment vividly. We didn't see the object again. When I walked home, I was so scared my knees were shaking, and I didn't dare tell my parents what we had experienced. I later told my teacher about it. He said it was probably something like what the old folks used to see, which turned into folklore. They claimed to have seen trolls traveling between mountains in fiery chariots to visit one another and hold troll weddings. However, he suggested that at mountains with mineral deposits, gases could rise that were phosphorescent and contained some magnetic force. These gases would be attracted to mountains with similar properties, appearing as if they were trying to make contact with each other. I found this to be an interesting explanation at the time. When Erik sat down with UFO Sweden in 1974, he reflected on his teacher's explanation of phosphorescent gases. I found this to be an interesting explanation at the time, he said. But even after decades, it didn't quite add up. Talking with UFO Sweden, he admitted those doubts still lingered. Had he witnessed a natural phenomenon or something far stranger? The answer still felt incomplete. Now for the second story. It all began between 5:15 p.m. and 5:30 p.m. on the evening of Friday, April 30th, 1976. On a quiet spring evening, Rune and Ina Frännfors set out on a routine drive through the rolling hills near Lake Siljan. As their car crested a rise, the landscape opened up before them, revealing the vast expanse of the lake, its thick 20-centimeter ice shimmering in the fading light. But what began as a tranquil journey quickly turned extraordinary when they spotted a strange craft tearing through the ice at astonishing speed. Earlier that afternoon, they had left their home in Borlänge and were now on their way to visit friends in Älvdalen, where they planned to celebrate Walpurgis night. As they drove along Route 70 toward Rättvik and approached Gärdebyn, both of them looked out over the lake toward Rättviken. At this spot, the beautiful Siljan is unobstructed by buildings or forests. The sun was in the north, and the ice fields out on the lake stood out clearly in the backlight. The ice cover glistened like a mirror. Suddenly, something completely unexpected happened. A strange craft became visible out on the ice. It had already carved out a path about 100 meters long through the ice, and as it now made a slight turn and picked up speed, it shattered the ice so that large chunks flew through the air. Rune Frännfors slowed the car. They were just in front of a hotel called Gärdebygården when the fantastic craft appeared on the ice of Siljan. Where it had come from, they could not tell. It was already there when they noticed it. Rune Frännfors and his wife exchanged a bewildered glance. What on earth could it possibly be? At first, the craft moved quite slowly, but then it gradually picked up speed and tore up an ice track about 1 kilometer long in just about 20 seconds. I estimated that the craft must have been traveling at a speed of between 90 and 100 kilometers per hour. Chunks of ice and slush sprayed up on both sides of the craft's bow as it forced its way through the ice, and the astonished Frännfors couple stared in silence at the incredible sight unfolding before their eyes. I got the impression that the craft was very pointed at the bow and seemed to stand upright as it accelerated. Rune Frännfors continued. It was pitch black in color and appeared to be open, without any superstructure. We didn't manage to see any more details. It was moving far too quickly. We held on to the belief for as long as we could that it was a racing boat we were seeing, and we wondered what kind of irresponsible person would be driving like that out on the ice. But at the same time, we noticed that the boat had such a strange shape. It was so pointed at the front that its shape didn't match that of an ordinary boat. Furthermore, it also seemed to be pointed at the back. From their observation point to the mysterious object, the Frännfors couple estimated the distance to be about 5 kilometers. At that distance, the mysterious craft appeared to be at least 10 meters long. They couldn't determine its height, partly because it moved so strangely in the water, and partly because its pointed bow was obscured by swirling ice chunks and spraying water. But if I were to make a guess, I'd say it was about as tall as a 5-meter boat, said Rune Frännfors. Ina Frännfors got a distinct impression that the craft moved through the water and ice in a bouncing motion, like an ordinary boat bouncing against overly high waves. Her husband, however, could not perceive anything like that. When we first saw it, it had already covered a small section of the channel it carved, because it was clear where it started, said Rune Frännfors. Then I had to focus on the traffic for a moment. My view was briefly obscured by some houses and trees, and when I looked back out toward the lake, the craft was gone. Ina Frännfors saw how it disappeared. She recounts, "When the craft had traveled about a kilometer, it suddenly vanished. The ice around the craft sprayed up to a height of 10 meters just before it disappeared into the depths. It looked like an explosion. After that, all that could be seen was white foam on the ice. It didn't sink like a submarine, but instead disappeared into the depths with a sliding motion." When the mysterious craft had disappeared into the depths of Lake Siljan, the Frännfors couple was seized by doubt. What if they had just witnessed a terrible accident? What if someone was now struggling for their life in the freezing water out there? At that moment, we decided to investigate what had happened, Rune Frännfors continued. We turned onto smaller roads along the lake and arrived at a farm by the shore. There, we made a phone call, explained what we had seen, and borrowed a pair of binoculars. But when I looked out toward the long ice channel, I couldn't see any boat or person in the water. They discussed the incident with the farm's owner and decided to contact the fire department in Rättvik. The owner of the farm lived next door to a firefighter who happened to be off duty at the time. When he heard what the Frännfors couple had witnessed, he immediately alerted the station. The fire department responded with a rescue vehicle and a boat. However, they couldn't reach the kilometer-long ice channel. They managed to get within 100 meters of it, but after that, it was impossible to traverse the ice because it was deemed too unstable. The head firefighter explained when they returned that it was absolutely impossible for any boat to have traveled at such high speed and carved out such a long ice channel in ice that thick, said Rune Frännfors. And there you have it. 2 stories, decades apart, but united by the mysteries of Lake Siljan. Whether it's unexplained lights in the sky or a craft defying the laws of physics, these events remind us that not everything in our world has a neat and tidy explanation. What do you think? A natural phenomenon? A glimpse of something extraordinary? Or maybe just the imagination playing tricks? Whatever the answer, one thing's for sure. Lake Siljan continues to hold on to its secrets. This episode is especially meaningful to us because it's a glimpse into the mysteries of a place we have all called home. Sharing a bit of Darla with you makes this story all the more special. Thanks for joining us here at Stories Lost. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that walk the line between history and mystery. Until next time, take care.